And let me do something here that probably a lot of people would prefer that I not do, not you that are listening or watching. But well, there's even a number of conservatives who want to make a big deal about women's sports, and hey, I'm there. I think men should not be in women's sports, but we're talking about this curriculum in schools. But they don't want to go back to the source of it. Okay, let's walk back to the source of this. The source of it is when and it goes further than this, but the tipping point, let me put it that way. The tipping point was the U.S. Supreme Court's Obergefell ruling in 2015, which forced same-sex marriage on all 50 states. They took something that is morally objectionable and made it a right. Now, they can't, they made it legal, but they can't make it moral. And from that, we have all of these other issues that are coming forth in our public policy, and we're dealing with symptoms. Well, I made this argument back when the court was entertaining this. It's like abortion. You can legislate on it, you can rule on it, but you can never make it right because it is a violation of moral truth. Well, now we're seeing this. We've got about a half a dozen states that are now entertaining resolutions calling on the Supreme Court to overturn the 2015 decision redefining marriage. Folks, this issue will not go away. As long as there is truth, there will be a conflict. And one of the state lawmakers that is leading this effort in the state of Oklahoma is State Senator Dusty Deevers. He introduced the Covenant Marriage Act in the state Senate to put a fine point on what marriage really is. Senator Deevers, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's an honor to be with you, Tony, here on Washington Watch. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Let me ask you this question. What do you say to those on the left who claim that Obergefell, that ruling, settled this issue of the redefinition of marriage?
Yeah, people like to say that Obergefell is a settled law, but the truth is it's not. Obergefell isn't settled law. It's besetting immorality that's imposed by judicial decree. And court opinions can be referred to as settled law only if they are rooted firmly in the Constitution and the heritage and the tradition of the American people. And the fact is, Obergefell is fundamentally antithetical to all of these. And there is just no right to gay marriage in the Constitution. And some states are now passing resolutions, like you mentioned, in support of Clarence Thomas's ambition to overturn Obergefell. And Tony, ultimately, marriage is not the state's institution. It's God's institution. And really, no Supreme Court ruling that redefines a God-ordained institution is ever truly settled, not morally or culturally, and even constitutionally. The rogue court will stand in judgment before God for their decision. And the fact is, here in Oklahoma, our statutes still define marriage as between a man and a woman, and that's not a relic, that's reality. And I believe that it will one day be enforced again. If anything needs to be settled, it's the moral courage to stand for truth in an age of confusion.
Is this not parallel to what we saw with the overturn of Roe v. Wade? 50 years we were told it was settled law, but it wasn't, because it cannot be the law when it runs, as you said, counter to the moral law of God.
That's a fact. And, the Supreme Court has overturned itself over 300 times, proving that they are not ruling from on high, that they don't have the mind of God oftentimes, and they need to move back to the sanity that we see in the scriptures and rule accordingly.
Now, I want to ask you about the measure you've introduced, Covenant Marriage Act. I actually authored the nation's first covenant marriage law in Louisiana and came to Oklahoma and a number of years ago spoke to the legislature about it. But it was a pattern of marriage based upon biblical truth. Explain that legislation and the status of it there in Oklahoma.
Well, the legislation was killed this session in Judiciary Committee, and it was voted down 6-2, and 4 of those 6 that voted against it were Republicans. and it would simply give the option to religious religious citizens of Oklahoma who wanted a more meaningful form of marriage. It gave them an option to opt into a covenant marriage that didn't have no fault divorce clause, and it would have given them a tax credit for doing so, because we want to reward the very good that we see as foundational to society.
Well, that's very similar to the law that authored in Louisiana and that we presented in Oklahoma probably about 25 years ago. But it was an idea of modeling what is right, so that others will see the value that comes from marriage as designed by God. And I found that when we started running into trouble, we got it through Arkansas and through Arizona, but it was the divorce attorneys who didn't like it because it was going to bite into their business.
That's very true. I don't know who all came against it, but I know that Republicans sure did.
Well, Dusty, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for taking a stand for what is true and what is right. And even though it may not be in vogue today, we know that truth is everlasting. And so we have a right to stand and speak, have an obligation, I should say, to stand and speak that truth. So thanks for taking that stand, and thanks for joining us today on Washington Watch.
It's my joy and honor. Thank you.